Dea. Welcome back to my series where I'm breaking down the characters of The Man Who Laughs by Victor Hugo. Dea is one of those characters who is more of a symbol in the story rather than a three-dimensional character in her own right. I mean, let's face it, Victor Hugo was a brilliant writer in many respects, but writing three-dimensional, fleshed-out female characters, especially the ingenues, that wasn't one of his strong suits. Dea has basically three characteristics. She is blind, she is beautiful, and she is madly in love with Gwynplaine. And on the surface, that's all there is to her, but we do get little sprinklings of her personality throughout the story. When Gwynplaine tries to explain to Dea what sight is, she doesn't believe him. She says, "What is this thing you call seeing? I cannot see, I know. It seems to me that to see means to hide." And Gwynplaine is like, no, to see means to reveal things. You know, you see something and you know it's a real thing. And Dea thinks about this for a second and she goes, storyteller. Her blindness, like for a lot of people who are VI or blind talk back me up on this, it is a blessing in many ways because it allows her to see through a lot of society's bullshit, especially because a lot of society's bullshit is rooted in physical appearances or social status or things like that. So Dea is like, yeah, I can say through all that nonsense. That's all stupid. But on the other hand, she lives in the 18th century. So there wasn't a lot of technology to help the blind back then. So her world is very fleeting. It's very much stuff comes into her life and then once it's gone, it's gone. So she lives very much in the moment, and she can also be kind of jealous, rightfully so. For instance, when Duchess Josiana attends their performance, and it's clear that both Gwynplaine and Ursus were awestruck by her, and the whole audience was so awestruck by Josiana that it messed up the vibe of the whole show. The audience paid more attention to Josiana in the crowd rather than watching the show. And Dea knew that, even though they didn't tell her what was going on until later. She finds out there was this beautiful woman in the crowds, and Dea says, "Could not this woman be prevented from coming?" On the surface, Dea seems just like a typical ingenue, and she seems kind of like the stereotype of the person who's blind, who doesn't have a lot going on upstairs because they're blind, but I see Dea as more than that, and the fact that Dea in the book is kind of a blank slate is really great for me as a playwright because there's a lot of potential with her character. I see a lot of myself in Dea and a lot of my friends who are also visually impaired and blind. There's a lot of truth to her character, and even in her name, Dea, which is Latin for goddess, I love the fact that Victor Hugo not only was like, I'm going to create a character who represents the divine, and it's going to be a female character, it's going to be a female character who is blind. Fantastic. Victor Hugo was a man so far ahead of his time because in The Man Who Laughs, we have two characters who are disfigured and deformed, and they see through society's nonsense. In Notre Dame de Paris, we have, of course, the character of Quasimodo, who is similar. The fact that Victor Hugo took characters with disabilities and recognized that, hey, they're fully human and they are able to call society out on its shit and are able to see through a lot of societal nonsense was so ahead of its time when you consider the fact that that's where, even for today, characters with disabilities and performers with disabilities struggle with society and the performing arts, seeing us as being capable of portraying fully fleshed out characters. So bravo to Victor Hugo. But that is the character of Dea, and I see her as being a witchy woman, or as witchy as she could be given the time period. I could see Ursus teaching her all about how to brew tinctures and potions and make charms out of herbs and stuff like that, while Ursus teaches Gwynplaine his philosophy and the wisdom of that, and he would teach that today as well. But I could see Ursus really teaching Dea how to be what in today's terms would be a kitchen witch. So those are my thoughts on Dea. What do you think of her?